Welcome, everyone, to 2024. Cheers. This is not coffee. Now, first topic of the new year. My last video may have been uploaded in the new year, but I made it just before the new year, so I guess you could say this is the first topic of the new year. Whatever, first, second, who cares? Anyway, topic of this video is the whole Ten Commandments story. I remember when I was a kid, I went and saw the movie, The Ten Commandments. The Cecil B. DeMille, I believe. Cecil B. DeMille directed. Charlton Heston, the great Charlton Heston, starred as Moses, and the great Yul Brynner played the Pharaoh. Apparently, it was Pharaoh Ramses. I don't think it says that in the Bible. They picked Ramses for whatever reason, made him the bad guy. Fact of the matter is, though, if you know anything about ancient Egypt, and this has been confirmed by whatever anthropologists, historians, archaeologists, Egyptologists, most of the pharaohs were, the depictions in Ten Commandments. I mean, I was blown away by that movie as a kid. It had amazing special effects, even for the 50s. I saw it in like the 70s or 80s, but it was amazing. Like the Red Sea parting and all this stuff. The angel of death coming down from around them, like a cloud coming down around the moon and down, killing all the firstborn of the Egyptians. But anyway, the point is, it's a fact. It's that looking at the history of Egypt, people who study this stuff, that most of the pharaohs were actually nice guys. They weren't these ruthless dictators like is portrayed in the film. Now, I'm not saying that the film says that the film doesn't, say every pharaoh was bad, but they portray this particular pharaoh, Ramses, as a particularly nasty character. I don't know what. I think there was a real Ramses. I don't know what he was in real life. You'd have to look up the history, but apparently, yeah, most of the pharaohs were pretty cool dudes. They were like, what you could call benevolent dictators, which is kind of a contradiction in terms. But to be a dictator, you can't be benevolent. But I mean, they were the closest thing, let's say, closest thing that any leader has ever come to being a benevolent dictator, whatever. But actually the Egyptian civilization did not start to decay until after the priests started taking power. The priest class. They started figuring out how to make money and how to get power, and they started ruling Egypt through the pharaohs. They told the pharaohs what to do after that. And if a pharaoh didn't, cooperate, it was like, they suspect that might have happened to one of the pharaohs, possibly Tutankhamun, because they found like a gash in their skull, where they, in the back of their skull, where they may have been, assassinated. And yeah, Egyptian civilization was doing okay until the religious fanatics, or the ambitious clergy class started to take control. Little history lesson there. But yeah, another point is that there were no slaves in ancient Egypt. There just weren't. It's just it's an established fact now. There okay, little a bit of a side note here. Okay, yes, yes, there were some slaves, but that was those were slaves that were taken in military conquests. Okay, you win a battle, you win a war, your prisoners are now slaves. The enemy combatants that you've captured are now slaves. All of the other nations' women and children you round up, and they're now your slaves. Every nation did that. Every society, every tribe, every country did that in those days. If you defeated an enemy in battle, you took their stuff, you took all their shit as spoils of war, you took all their gold and silver, and you took their people as slaves. So those were the only slaves that were in Egypt. Slavery itself was not an institution in Egypt as portrayed in the film and as written in the Bible, the book of Exodus and that, let my people go, you know, it's a pure fantasy again. There were not 1 or 2 million slaves who had their own city that they lived in, and da da da. The fact of the matter is, all these massive Egyptian monuments, the pyramids and the Sphinx, and all these monuments took a lot of, they didn't have machinery, cranes and things in those days, so it did take a lot of physical human labor, but those laborers were paid. They were not slaves, they were employees, right? The architects, the engineers who designed it all, the craftsmen who did all the art, the stonework and sculpting and carving, and just down to the common laborer. They were all paid employees. They were not slaves. They were paid for their work. They even had health care. They had a little, they had like a hospital or a medical medical center, healthcare center for anyone who got sick or injured. They took care of these people. I mean, they were their own people. It was Egyptians, right? Work, doing this work as paid laborers, and they were well taken care of with health care and everything. Sometimes they were even, by the way, the Egyptians invented beer, so for some reason, sometimes they would actually pay these guys in beer. you'd get your, you know, you'd get your vat of beer at the end of the day, I guess, which was a pretty clever idea, because by the time you've had a couple of swigs, you don't give a shit that you've been paid in beer. So it's a pretty good, like, like a kind of like a circular argument or a self-fulfilling prophecy. Just pay people in beer. That might piss them off. I don't want beer, I want money. But after they've had a couple of beers, they won't give a shit, right? Those pharaohs are pretty clever guys. But the point is, no, the slavery was not an institution. There were not like 1 or 2 million slaves, working and slaving away in Egypt. This was not the case. And one glaring factoid, whatever you want to call it, that proves that this particular Bible story, there are, you know what I believe about Bible stories. But this particular Bible story, something that proves a glaring piece of evidence that proves, or I should say, lack of evidence, like overwhelming, glaring lack of evidence that proves that this story is not true, is a fabrication of man. As the title of this video says, 1 or 2 million people, slaves, according to the story. You can read the account in Exodus. You can watch, if you don't want to read the account, watch the movie, 10 Commandments. So these, finally, after the 10 plagues, the Pharaoh concedes and releases the slaves, and off they go. In you know, onward to the promised land. They have been told. Jehovah tells Moses, and Moses tells his people, um, "We're going to take you to the promised land." So they're going to the promised land. The land flowing with milk and money, or whatever. And along the way, they apparently, I'm not going to go into details here because actually I myself don't remember every little detail. I know they built themselves. They got all their gold. They got all their gold and melted it, and had Aaron, Moses' brother Aaron, build a golden calf for them to worship. A false god. Anyway, they did a bunch of things that really pissed off Jehovah. he got a little, and you know how Jehovah loves to punish people. He just loves it. Oh, by the way, he likes to punish people for the tiniest infractions. I mean, this was a pretty big infraction, worshiping another god, building a golden calf. That was a huge infraction. But Jehovah loves to punish people, even for tiny infractions. And I'll get to that later. I'll have a little story to tell, a very short story to tell after this one. So remind me, don't let me forget that one. But anyway, the Israelites pissed off Jehovah. Okay. So he says to them, you know what? You motherfuckers are not going to enter the promised land. This generation is not going to enter the promised land. Your children will. But you are condemned to wandering the wilderness, the desert, for 40 years. Okay? You pissed me off. It's like you're not going to the promised land. You're going to wander around for 40 years, and your children are going to enter the promised land. Although, I mean, people didn't live that long in those days. So maybe if you were 20 years old at the time, after 40 years you'd be 60. Yeah, you might live that long, but it'd be hard, probably not, because wandering the desert for 40 years would probably kill, all of you. By the time you reach 50 or 60, you probably had it at that point. You're probably toast. So the next generation is going to enter the promised land. That's the deal. Okay, so you have 1 or 2 million people wandering off into the Sinai desert, and they wander around, nomadic lifestyle for 40 years. Okay, and then their kids and whoever's left, whatever lucky survivors there are from that last generation, get to enter the promised land. Okay. Now, if a couple of million people wandered the Sinai for 40 years, you would think there would be some archaeological evidence of that, right? It's a large area. A couple of million people, that's the size of a modern day city. I mean, that's a lot of people. 1 or 2 million. And they're wandering around, you would have think there'd be something left behind, some artifacts, old discarded sandals, old worn out. They're wandering the wilderness, their sandals are going to wear out, right? Where they didn't have recycling, they didn't have garbage cans to put them in, right? They didn't have trash dumps, so they would have just tossed them wherever they were. You find old discarded sandals. Remember, it's a couple of million people here. Old discarded sandals, maybe the strap of a sandal came off. They were making animal sacrifices. That's another thing that Jehovah loves. He loves to be sacrificed to. He loves to kill animals and burn them, and he loves that smell of burning cow flesh. Apparently, it actually says that in the Bible. He says it says the smell of the burnt sacrifice, the cows, is a pleasing odor to Jehovah. So apparently Jehovah loves the smell of burning cow. I don't know. It's credible because when you're barbecuing in the backyard, barbecuing those burgers, it smells kind of nice. So who knows? I don't know if the smoke though reaches up that high all the way to heaven, but who knows? And Jehovah, does Jehovah have nostrils? He can actually. Anyway, my point is, he loves animal sacrifices. He loves human sacrifices too. He told Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac. He sacrificed his own son Jesus. So Jehovah loves sacrifice. As long as he doesn't have to sacrifice. I've never heard of Jehovah sacrificing himself. But he loves to have other people sacrifice themselves and animals. Oh, he loves it. Animals by the hundreds they would sacrifice. Every other day they'd sacrifice something. There was always some special day of atonement, day of this, day of that, where they'd sacrifice more animals. So they were sacrificing animals all the time: cows, goats, sheep, chickens, dogs, cats. Who knows? You'd think there'd be animal bones everywhere, right? You'd think there'd be animal bones strewn across that whole area. What about people? How many people must have died? Most of those people, most of that entire generation, must have passed away in those 40 years. Like I said, anyone who was 20 or 30 at the time that Jehovah told them to fuck off to the wilderness, by the end of the 40 years, they'd be gone. They'd be dead. Where are all the bones, the human bones? Buried. You should be able to find actual burial sites. Full of human bones. There's nothing. Nobody's found. People should be stumbling over this shit. There are still people who live in that area, nomads. Sheep herders, goat herders, whatever. They should be stumbling over this shit every day. Somebody should find something. Oh, here's another bone. Oh, here's another sandal. Oh, here's another. What about pottery? Everybody in those days used clay pottery, right? And that shit would break, especially living a nomadic lifestyle, or it would get old. Maybe they would make new clay. Wouldn't be that. They don't need a factory or anything to make clay pottery, so they'd be making new pottery and throwing out the old ones, right? People should be stumbling over this shit. Shards of clay pottery. I mean, use your imagination. Just tons of shit. They didn't have, ironclad titanium suitcases like we have today. They were carrying their shit, wrapping it up in cloths and rags and blankets. Some of that shit might have fallen off the cart, or fallen off while they were walking along, right? Little trinkets, little rings and pieces of jewelry. Should be able to find that stuff strewn all across that area. And yet there is nothing. Zero evidence. Zero artifacts. Right? And this allegedly only happened about 3,000 years ago. We're not talking about dinosaur bones that are buried, 300 feet underground from like 50 million years ago. This shit should be easy to find. You take a shovel, dig couple of inches, couple of feet, boom, you'll find a whole jackpot. It should be an archaeologist's wet dream, but there's nothing there. 3,000 years in cosmic time, in geological, archaeological time. 3,000 years is the blink of an eye. It's not like looking for dinosaur bones or, ancient, ancient giant centipedes or giant dragonflies and fossils. You should be able to kick the dirt and find something. Wasn't that long ago. Anyone who's still, tell that to try and explain this, along with all the other inconsistencies. Try and explain it to a Jehovah's Witness or any, believer, true believer, and they'll deny it. They'll say, well, no, there's some explanation for it, because these people believe they're always right. I mean, I can't imagine life. It's all about ups and downs. It's all about victories and defeats. It's all about achievements and failures. And sometimes it's about being right and being wrong. Can you imagine life what life would be like if you won every contest, if you achieved everything you set out to achieve, and if you were always right? What would life be like if you were always right? I can't imagine what kind of life these people lead. Not just religious people, but anyone of that nature who believes they're always right. Not only that they're never wrong, but it's like they believe they can never be wrong. You know, they believe that it's impossible for them to be wrong or make a mistake. These are people who never apologize for anything, who never admit that they've made a mistake, or been wrong about anything. What kind of life must they lead? It must be a very dark life. Because you have to hide. You have to hide from reality. It's like being a mole, a mole man or a mole woman, living underground, never breathing fresh air, never seeing the sun. You always got to hide. Dark lives, dark souls. A person like that must have a very dark soul. I mean, it must be hell. Anyway. Just getting back. Thank you for reminding me about the other story. This is a quickie. Maybe not so quick. Anyway, I'll try and make it quick. I'm tired of hearing the sound of my own voice. But as I said, Jehovah loves punishing people. Oh my God, does he love it? He can't wait for the opportunity. He can't wait for the opportunity for somebody to fuck up so he can pounce, right? So most of you maybe have seen the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? The Ark. If you've never heard about the Ark of the Covenant, okay? The Ark of the Covenant, according to the Bible, again, another story here, but the Israelites built a chest, okay, a box, and they put in it certain holy items, 2 or 3 holy things. One of them was the 10 Commandments, the actual tablets that Moses allegedly climbed up the mountain and God climbed back down again in his sandals and toga. The actual tablets, 10 Commandments, something else, a couple other things. So this was their holy chest. It was overlaid in gold. It was gorgeous. So, if it ever existed. But if you look at the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's gorgeous. When they show it in the movie, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful golden thing, cover, everything, angels on the top, wings overspread toward each other. It's pretty cool looking. Now, but according to the Bible story, Jehovah commanded that no one may even touch it. No one was allowed to touch the Ark of the Covenant except the high priest. Okay, only the high priest and maybe his assistant priests, the low priests. I don't know. Only the high priest and the low priests and the medium priests could touch the Ark of the Covenant. No one else was allowed, and the penalty was death. If you touched it, you would die. Okay, so obviously no one's going to walk up to the thing and touch it as a trick or a novelty. Hey, let's see if I can get away with touching. No, nobody's going to touch it if they're going to die. If Jehovah says you're going to die, of course nobody's going to touch it. But there was an incident. Again, you can read about this in the Bible. I don't know exact chapter and verse. But there was one incident, when they were traveling, they would load the ark. They would load the ark up on a donkey cart. You know what they haul things around in those days, right? Like a donkey cart. They put it on the thing, secured it, off they went, traveling wherever they were going, right? Before they built the temple in Jerusalem, before David, was it King David? Or anyway, one of these guys built the temple in Jerusalem, and then they put the ark there, for good in the most holy chamber, or whatever. But before that, they just took it around with them wherever they went. So they're hauling it on this donkey cart. They're moving along, and the cart itself, around the cart are these attendants or guards who are accompanying the cart, right, walking beside the cart. Now, in the story, the ark, for some reason, the ark becomes dislodged. They come up on a hill or a bump or piece of uneven road or something, and the cart starts to tip, and the ark starts to slide back. Okay, it starts to slide back, and it's gonna fall off the cart. Okay, I don't know if they didn't have a tailgate or something, but anyway, this thing is sliding back. You think of something so important and holy, they would have a tailgate, to prevent that from happening. Apparently they didn't. So this thing is sliding back. I mean, why would they, right? It makes for a great story, right? So you got to leave the tailgate out, or there would be no story, right? Because it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's all stories anyway, fairy tales. So this is how this fairy tale goes. So the thing starts sliding back, and it's about to slide off the ark, and it's one of the attendants who's back there reaches out instinctively, reflexively, automatically, without thinking, because that's how our reflexes work, right? He reaches out to stop it, to hold it back, to keep it, from falling off the cart. And he instantly dies. He dies. Jehovah zaps him for touching the Ark of the Covenant. All he was trying to do was save it. He was trying to save the Ark of the Covenant. But because of this, important commandment, what difference does it make who touches the ark? Why is that even a commandment? What difference does it make, right? But okay, don't touch the ark. Under normal circumstances, sure, I get it. Don't touch the ark. It's a holy thing. But this guy was trying to save the ark. And Jehovah struck him dead. My theory is that Jehovah put that bump in the road just so this guy would reach out and touch the ark, just so Jehovah could punish him, and by killing him, because Jehovah loves punishing people, doesn't he? So that's what happened according to the story. Oh, sorry. Jehovah, killed the guy just for trying to save the ark. Now, the other point I can't help thinking about is, according to the Bible, Jehovah created everybody, right? Jehovah created everything, human, including humans. He gave us a nervous system, a central nervous system, right? He gave us reflexes, right? And sometimes those reflexes work automatically, without thinking, right? That's what the doctor tests when you go for an examination, right? He takes that little hammer and knocks it on your knee to see if your knee goes if your leg goes like this. That's testing your reflexes, right? That's part of a health check. If you have healthy reflexes, Let's say